Back in the 1990s, a new material began to be used which was considered a great idea, and it was extremely clean, very light, very warm, and that's the polar fleece. And when polar fleece first appeared, this is one from the 1990s which I bought, which was pretty expensive at the time. They were considered something of a luxury item. You can see this one actually has tweed on it to show that it was a luxury item. And the fleece was extremely tightly, well, woven might not be the right word, but it was strong, it didn't break. Now polar fleeces are made from recycled plastic, usually plastic bottles. The problem is today they're very common and they're very cheaply made. And when you run your hand down a new one, you'll almost immediately see particles coming off. All of these particles are plastic. And the problem is, every time you wash a polar fleece, the plastic is actually running off out down the drain, and it'll be going into the sewers if you're joined up to the sewage. If you have a septic tank, of course, it'll be going into the septic tank and it should stay put. But otherwise, like most people if you live in a city, it's going to be going out eventually it'll be through the sewage treatment, and eventually the small particles of plastic will find their way into the sea. And go into any shop and examine any polar fleece and you'll see the particles just come off. In fact, they're probably very dangerous. We're probably inhaling them all the time. But so that raises the question, should we actually ban polar fleeces? Or should there be a much tighter quality control on them? These old polar fleeces are extremely well made, but even they must have particles that break off. This one has sort of been retired. It's almost vintage at this stage, but I wore it for years. It was extremely strong, and of course it had to show it was well made. It was expensive and it was a luxury garment. They have all this tweed here just to but since then it's become a very cheap garment. It's one of the cheapest materials you can buy, but that seems to also mean that they're not very well made and the material is quite brittle, and there must be thousands if not millions of tons of particles of polar fleeces going out into our oceans directly from washing machines. So the question is, should we actually ban the polar fleece, or is there some way of controlling or ensuring quality control? Because there doesn't seem to be much of it at the moment. And bear in mind, the polar fleece, you look at it and you see clothing, but what you're looking at is basically the same as a plastic bottle. Just like if you were throwing Coca-Cola bottles or Fanta bottles or 7-Up bottles or whatever plastic bottles into the sea, it wouldn't be allowed, and none of those companies would do that. Yet companies that make clothing, it's happening all the time. And even walking into a shop, you're inhaling the particles. If you rub your hand up against the fleece, and you'll see little particles of fleece coming off, like little filaments. So for public safety, should we ban it?